welcome to this very special ES Stories Festival panel on the new Aardman and Netflix animation Robin Robin. It gives me enormous pleasure to welcome to the stage the film's creators and directors, Dan Ojari and Mikey, please.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robbie. Hello.
Lovely to be here.
Now, before we start talking about the film, the trailer is about to go live, isn't it? It's not been widely seen at all yet, but
No.
Yeah, I think it's in a couple of weeks' time.
That's right, yeah.
right. Okay, fine.
Exciting.
So, but perhaps we should have a look at that first.
Well, this is the teaser.
This is a teaser.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
A
Right.
small section of it, yeah.
So an even sneakier peek.
A
This is
of
the
what's
sneaky
in store.
teaser.
It's funny looking. Can we eat it?
No, it's a robin, I think.
Hi, Robin. Can we keep her?
Well, maybe. After all, she's only one little robin.
It's like we're the three little extra mice at the front of the burrow.
There was audible awing from the audience.
I did hear an awe
one
at
awe,
some
which
point.
it meant a lot.
That was good.
Thanks for
Thank
doing
you.
that.
Whoever did that.
So look, let's start by you tell us a bit about who Robin is and where did she come from?
Who's Robin? Well, Robin is a robin, and she's brought up by a family of mice. Her egg, unfortunately, falls out of her nest when she's before she's even born. So she wakes up to find herself in the burrow of a mouse family who are a lovely bunch of mice thieves, and they sort of take her in as one of their own. So she's brought up amongst her mice family who have, well, I suppose their way of life is all about sneaking into houses and stealing crumbs, as most mice do. And so she's brought up in this very loving family, but intrinsically is different to them. They're very good at sneaking in and being silent and stealing crumbs, where she's a sort of flappy, loud, exuberant bird. So that's Robin, and that's the kind of where we meet her at the beginning of the story.
And it's good.
I think.
It's going on Netflix as a Christmas animation, right? So did you think of it as a Christmas themed project when you sat down to write it?
I think it's always been a Christmas themed idea, because the initial sort of starting point was thinking about how lovely the tradition of a Christmas special is, and how much they meant to us growing up, and the sort of ritual of the snowman every year that has a sort of really special place in, especially when we were growing up, the kind of culture of Christmas, and it's such a lovely stage to tell a story on, and obviously all the Aardman Wallace and Gromit's that all came out at Christmas, and they sort of kind of inspired us as filmmakers as well. So it was always a kind of seen as a lovely.
And I think that central premise of a robin raised by a family of burglar mice is so sort of tonally, unavoidably Christmassy.
Well,
we would have been idiots not to have.
Yeah, it felt. I mean,
pushed it in
a
that
story
direction.
about a robin at Christmas felt like a really, I don't know, it felt right, and we were always constantly, because it's taken quite a long time from having the original idea to making it, always every year thinking, is someone going to make a really, a film about a robin at Christmas, because then we can't do our idea. But fortunately, I don't think we've really.
No.
No one did.
No one did.
So,
Just beat them to it.
You mentioned the snowman, which is for me as well, totally formative Christmas viewing growing up. Was there one particular part of that film that struck a chord when you were younger that you were keen to, to perhaps have a similar effect with this?
Yeah, well, I guess there is, I mean, Raymond Briggs describes it as a film about death, doesn't he? He sort of says, it's all about death.
Quite
But
a sad ending.
it has that warmth, but there's also the sort of the little bit of grit in it. And I think that bit of grit that makes everything taste that much sweeter around it. We were really keen with Robin to, hold the snowman in our minds and those other stories, which aren't just all song and dance. There is that little bit of darkness in there, which is part of why we have winter festivals. You need that darkness there in order to give contrast to the celebration and all the warmth and the light that those Christmas celebrations are. So.
I agree. That means I agree.
Yeah, that was
I
the
do
signal
that.
we're gonna do, James,
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I guess it's the honesty as well of something like that. Something like the Snowman, which has a very, it actually has quite a bleak ending to it. But I think probably you connect with it because it has an honesty to it, and it's not all just a wonderful sort of sequence. But I suppose probably the thing that, because it's an animation and it's handcrafted and it's brilliant. I mean, it's beautifully crafted, and I think that's why it's stood the test of time, because it's not been made. I don't know. It's been made with a very physical technique, and every frame drawn, and it's sort of, you can feel the sort of the people that have made it in the film, which gives it such great warmth. So I think, and that's a big part of why we like making stop motion, because you can. The sort of craftsmanship that goes into it is visible in the end result, which adds such a lovely warmth to it, I suppose.
Is this the first project you two have made together, or have you worked on
No.
stuff?
Oh, if only. No, we've been working together for about 10, 12 years, or something like that. We met at university and did projects together on and off, and then we formed a studio about 6 years ago called Parabella, and then so as a directing duo we made a bunch of short films and a couple of music videos maybe, and spent a lot of time developing longer form stories and comic books and things like that. And this was one of the main fruit actually.
And was stop motion always something that you were drawn towards?
Yeah, I mean, we both grew up on the staples of Aardman. I mean, we have very particular memories of like first watching The Wrong Trousers and how formative all that time was. And so yeah, we were both making stop motion films at university, and so naturally kind of helping each other out. And
that's kind of how we started working together in a way, because with stop motion you've got to have to film it, you've got to have an actual physical space, and especially if you're making like small things and music videos and short films. So we kind of hired a studio out and sort of shared all our equipment, and thought it would be a good kind of way to pool our sort of resources. But then actually we spent most of the time in there sort of developing ideas, because we were sort of like, we want to tell stories, and and that so we spent a lot of time making our comic book, which is still being made, and a bunch of other ideas that were sort of at different levels of, some of them were like just an idea, others we sort of made a little pilot for, and so we were pushing all those along, and Robin always felt like just an idea, and perhaps it is because we'd thought of the stage that we wanted to tell the story on right from the beginning, which was like this Christmas special. Perhaps it's sort of like because it was formed in that way, it was always felt like a very exciting and thing to sort of pitch around to people.
Yeah, I mean, one of the nice things about obviously always loving stop motion growing up is that when we took this to Aardman, we actually got to work with a bunch of the people who made those things that had sort of influenced us at quite a young age. So like Dave Alex Riddett, who's the DOP on this, was also the DOP on The Wrong Trousers, and every now and again we'd be working on something and he would just sort of try and be like, oh yeah, so the bullets that we did in The Wrong Trousers were these sort of bars of perspex, and we're like, oh yeah, I totally forgot that's
Yeah.
that was you who did all these
It was
amazing
quite
things
dreamy
that like inspired us as kids.
because Aardman they're an incredible company, and that some of the people there that are still working and making the films are the people that made the very first stuff there, that kind of created the studio. And so they've got such a brilliant culture there of having these really experienced kind of crew, and then there's just a really brilliant mix of people there, and that was quite dreamy and quite surreal to be working and making this project with the people that a lot of the animators, they've worked on all of the Chicken Run and all the Wallace and Gromits, and even the equipment, you'd be like, oh, this is the camera track that did all the moves in Chicken Run 2. Like
a couple of hard
gosh.
nerds like us. So it was really exciting.
It was a real joy, but yeah.
And what amazes me about Aardman is when you go to visit other, like the great animation studios around the world, so like at Pixar or at Studio Ghibli, they have like a shrine to Aardman in those studios.
Yeah.
And I think it's something about growing up with Aardman, and because they have that such a kind of a homegrown, homemade aesthetic to their work, you don't necessarily always remember, or certainly I don't, that this studio is kind of respected around the world.
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think it is that they do so particularly well?
I mean, there's an absolute sort of devotion to the craftsmanship, obviously, of what they do, and it is such a particular craft, and they absolutely excel at pulling that off quite effortlessly. Like there was never a point during the production really where someone sort of shook their head and said, "No, I'm afraid we can't do that." It'd be quite amazed, be like, "Yeah, I think the camera's."
People would shake their head, but they'll go, oh, "Okay, well."
They'll just sort of bite down there. But I mean, I think there's the emotional part, obviously, with everything they do, and there's the probably quite like quintessentially British humour, which is quite dry, which I think maybe the reason that travels so well in Japan and places, because of a very similar sense of humour there. But I think it's the craft, really.
Yeah, maybe they really celebrate, I guess, like the independent approach to filmmaking, and that coupled with, and a lot of their work is coupled with just fantastic sense of humour that kind of, it doesn't, they became such a well-known thing in the just sort of mainstream culture, but they're actually, they've formed from just a bunch of people making what is quite almost like outsider art, really, but somehow have been sort of like welcomed into the whole sort of mainstream culture, and I think they know that, and they've always kept that sort of spirit that the sort of, as long as it connects with people, the sort of odder and the funnier and the more handmade it is, the better, and I think that's probably a big part of it.
Well, it's artist led, it's an artist led studio.
Yeah.
Pete Lord and Dave Sproxton.
And I think the craftsmanship, it's so like, maybe intuitive is not quite the right word, but when you're a child watching the Wallace and Gromit films, I mean, when I've been rewatching them recently with my kids, I'm amazed at the kind of expressiveness they get out of Gromit. I mean, just the delicacy and the complexity, like the human emotions mapped onto that plasticine dog's face. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a character design that you both like, and you see and you think, my goodness, this is the kind of the pinnacle of this stuff that you
in Aardman's.
Yeah,
I think Gromit is that, because he has no words, and he's got a brow and he doesn't really even have a mouth, but he's one of the most expressive animated characters ever, I think, and it's just down to, I guess, the way that he's the backdrop in which he's in, and the amazing, Nick Park and the animators and their ability to kind of draw out the sort of very clear emotion from almost anything. They can, all the work that Aardman have done in the past, you can just, they just have a blob of plasticine and a couple of eyes, and they can, make it emote anything, and that is a real skill that they've refined, and so that was a real kind of honor to be able to work with that team of people, and we've with this it's not plasticine, it's needle felted wool, which has its own limitations. It's actually not as, plasticine and clay is the sort of perfect material to animate with, really, because you can do whatever you like with it, and it stays where it is. Whereas needle felt is a bit trickier, and we had quite a lot of R&D time to figure out how we'd get them to still emote and move, or even just sort of move around, because if you don't do it right, needle felt doesn't really move. It kind of just rips. So we had
discovered that
they were
later.
they were very patient and very very good at problem solving.
We found that some of the characters you could, but it really depended on the design of the character. Use some of that sculpting. So like the cat, you'll see later. Oh, there's Dad Mouse. Yeah. So the cat later, you'll see, has very sort of sculptable face, which was brilliant for expressing, and part of the sort of the challenge of this magpie there, by Richard E. Grant, had of one of the more expressive kind of beak shapes. Obviously, using birds are tricky to emote with, but we had to develop a whole language. There's a huge character bible, and it was all to do with like the types of angles that we showed the head at. So there's a Japanese puppetry called bunraku puppetry, where the expressions are changed just by the angles of the heads. They have a particular mouth, and when they show them to the audience like this, they're angry, but like this, they're happy. And we had to apply that in certain situations.
Yeah, if you wanted them to smile while they're leaning back, it's impossible because the line makes it look like they're. So there was quite a lot of
figuring out. But once we had the set of rules, it was actually okay. They actually make sense, and so by some point in the production, the animators who had now sort of, we'd all had to learn these set of rules together, and it would become a sort of a shorthand. And so actually the performances improved throughout. Luckily, it's not shot sequentially, so
it was. It's funny because the character design that was done by Matt Forsyth, who's the character designer and production designer of the film, who has a really sort of stripped back, and or what we really loved in his work and what he did for us here was very kind of quite minimal design, really, and very keeping the shapes really bold and clear. And that meant that most of the characters, they're quite simplistic in their design, and it meant that I mean it's really testament to the animators, because they get so much emotion out of these characters that they don't really have eyebrows, or they don't have they don't have massive mouths that you can sort of really convey emotions really sort of very clearly. So it was a sort of I guess a little exercise in simplicity and how you when it's boiled down to just the eyes. And
especially this particular shot. I mean, we're not probably going to watch the movingness of it, but I remember
that's the cat. And
it was Rodri? Was it Rodri animated? Is he here? Ah,
okay.
A Rodri fan. Yeah.
They're two animators. That's I think that's Andy actually.
Oh no, that's the other. Oh, sorry, I thought it was
Andy,
the one. But there was an amazing shot where the animator Rodri had managed to get Robin to breathe and panic in a way that the puppet wasn't even designed to do, but he had just sort of found a way of manipulating it. So they're incredible performers.
Shot to that, isn't it?
The animators.
Oh yeah,
and was working in needle felt. That was always a core part of the pitch. I mean, you didn't.
Well,
we could.
It was actually a part of when we presented it to Sarah. Well, when we first presented it to Sarah, we didn't. I don't think we mentioned needle felt. But when we came back to Aardman and we sort of came for a proper meeting, we brought little needle felted Christmas decorations to give out to everyone at Aardman to sort of bribe them. I think it's bribery, but no, it was just to kind of like get them excited about the idea of them being needle felted characters, because there's a real charm and simplicity to. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they've always been a tradition, but definitely now the little sort of needle felted characters and decorations that you can hang on a Christmas tree.
There's something about the way that needle felt absorbs the light, like it has this kind of glow to it. I mean, we've used a bunch of different materials in our films previously. One of them was this material called plastozote that's a bit like yoga mat, and it kind of, when you hit it with a light from the back, it sort of has this glow. And I think it's not sculptable and there's lots of limitations with it, but the nice thing about needle felt is that it does kind of take that light and give out this glow. You get these lovely sort of rim lights from it, and something about the warmth of that material feels like very appropriate for the story.
Stop motion seems to work best when you know what the material is. On one hand you kind of know what that is, and it feels very tactile, but it's moving in a way that it shouldn't, or there's a character that you think, well, I could pick that up and it would be a little cute little thing, like sculpture, but it's actually got a real life in it and a real emotions. And I think that magic it happens when you know what the material is and it's moving in a way that you think it shouldn't. So that was a real benefit of using needle felt and having that in the center of every shot, because the characters are in all of the shots, and it always sort of grounds you in this very real tactile experience, I think, of the world.
I think it's the same for the snowman as well, right? I remember watching that as a kid, and because it's coloured pencils, coloured pencils. Coloured pencils. So it almost feels like you could do that yourself. You mentioned that these cute little models. How little are they? I mean, were you using puppets of different scales for different?
They're life size. So the Robin is this size. Someone would get it. Well, we had
today.
we had a few different scales, didn't we? We had 3.
Yeah, there's C scale. So like the smallest Robin puppet was about 1 centimetre. This puppet here on screen is probably yay big, just under a foot. So it was, and then.
We had
and then there was a B scale, which
so
was
the 2 main scales were, one was slightly larger than real life, and one was half the size of real life. So it was quite funny with all the sets. Some of the sets, like there's a kitchen sequence, we built that kitchen and it was.
Was it 170?
Yeah, so it's almost like twice normal size. So you'd go in and you'd feel like a tiny little sort of thing yourself going around this huge kitchen that was made.
Big oversized kettles.
And it meant that if we made the puppets and Robin a bit bigger, we could get more detail in her expressions and things like that. And then there was another one which was a shed that was sort of half size. So you'd go in this tiny shed that we'd made. And so it was quite funny going between all the different sets, and each one had... Well, there was. I think was there 3 or maybe even 4 for the really wide shots.
I think by the end of it, we were just like, it's a different scale altogether. And the production team would sort of cry a tear of blood.
And it was great going into the art department workshop, and they had this room where all the props and things that were just about to go out onto the floor to be filmed would sort of be put, and you'd go in there and there'd just be such a variety of locations, but also sizes. You'd have doors this big with beautifully made little, cupboards and lights and things next to this oversized teapot that's got all this painting on it. It was really amazing.
And when the sets are being designed, do you have to take into account that someone will be squeezing in to a corner somewhere?
There's always what's called an access issue. So it was a constant conversation between the sort of art director and then Ian Whitlock, our animation supervisor, which would be like, nope, like send it back, jigsawing holes in, and you would have to like consider that in terms of actually some of the shot choices. But well, if we go this far back, we're going to have to like, chop the set in half in order for the characters to, the animators to get in that far. So yeah, there was lots of that practical side of things. If you're asking an animator to walk up some stairs and kneel down and stretch like this 500 times, that's going to cause an injury. So you have to be really mindful of what you're asking.
Can I ask, when the production was running at full steam, how much footage was being created per day?
Fun fact time.
I don't.
Not enough.
Yeah, it was always not enough.
It was always not
It
enough.
was.
I think probably.
I don't know. Yeah, we tried to get through. We did it in shots, so we were really aiming to try and get 20 shots finished every week, or it was around about that, and we which is a bit misleading because there's one shot in the film which is 25 seconds, which is a really long shot for animation, and the camera moves and there's loads of things happening, and then there are other shots which are half a second close up, but you'd sort of, it would even out, so you'd just try and.
But you'd say generally an animator would get a second a day, something like that.
Probably, yeah.
Probably, yeah. On average,
so there's lots of units. There's sort of 14 different units and that are being animated on at the same time, and then there are other units. So unit means like just a room with lights and camera and the setting being set up as well. So then they can move to those. So it sounds really slow, but it's actually. I mean, funnily enough, that is a slow part of the process, but even before then, every shot that is being filmed has had to been, written, drawn out by a story artist, probably about 4 or 5 times, because you're just trying loads of different things out, and edited. You put sound to it, you put audio to it, and at any point before you start filming, all those storyboards and things like that can get scrapped, and you can go, let's just not do that sequence anymore. Let's think of something else that makes the story better or is funnier. So there's this huge amount of work that goes into what we call the animatic, which is just a sort of sketched out version of the film. But that is really where you figure out exactly what you're making, because with stop motion you can't sort of turn up in the studio and think, what should we do? Should we have Robin? You've got to plan everything exactly, and exactly how long every shot is. So you have got to make the film before you make the film.
Yeah, there was no room for like retakes in this, even though it was so slow.
So you've already gone through. So I actually think the animating part is really quick and cathartic. Like, yes, the second day, wow. But the nice thing about it, and I guess it is different to most of the forms of animation, is that when the animator goes in to animate it and you brief them and you talk about the performance of the scene, and we'll do sort of video references so you can act out what the characters would be doing, so you can really communicate the exact thing that's going on. Once the animator's done it, that's it, it's done. You can't go back and change it. So it's a bit like a live performance each time, and you can't refine it after that, which is something quite unique to stop motion, and it can be frustrating, but it's also a positive in that you just make sure that on the day, it's like going out onto stage or something like that. You've got to prep, you've got to make sure that everyone knows what they're doing.
It's very similar to live action in terms of where a CG or 2D production might sit in a live action film, probably stop motion somewhere in between.
Yeah, but you can't do retake. You can't go, let's try that again, or
you can, but I guess you would not.
It's not smiled upon. We didn't have the luxury.
We didn't on this, no.
I think one of the most beautiful things about stop motion is that you can, when you're watching the finished film, that you can almost kind of detect the ghost of all that industry happening around it. And then Wallace and Gromit, it's the fingerprints on the plasticine, right?
Yeah.
You kind of see the animator's craft. With needle felt, I'm assuming you still, it has that same tactility.
It has what's called a boil to it, yeah. So you do still see, and we had to consciously decide on the level of that boil, because at one extreme it can just be really distracting, and you're just looking at bits of fluff rippling on the body, and that's going to take you out of the moment, and the moment is about conveying the emotion and conveying the story. But at the same time, you don't want to neuter it completely, because then what's the point? And as you said earlier, it was really spot on, which is like you want to feel like you could have done it yourself in a way, and that's always what's been really exciting for us, I think, looking at stop motion and these hand-rendered animation techniques, is that it's like a bridge between you and the film. It's nice to feel like there is that connection, and it might inspire someone to go out and try something like it themselves.
Funnily enough, after I've been fortunate enough to see Robin, the finished film already, and after seeing it, my kids got this big kind of stop motion burning desire to go out and create stuff themselves, and we've been doing it, and it is not easy. You know? You can watch it, but that's the beauty of it, right? Because it has that kind of inspirational quality. Now, you mentioned just then about reference videos. We have to talk about the cast of the film, who are completely wonderful. Now, to cast Robin herself, how widely did you throw the net?
It was really wide, wasn't it? We just
we did look at, not I'd say hundreds, but we certainly. There was a huge audition, but Bronte Carmichael, who plays our Robin, was so standout that when we heard her audition, and we did a screen test. A screen test for animations that you take the voice and you animate it onto the character, and as soon as those two things sat together, it was so clear that it had to be Bronte. And I think we'd always imagined. Robin's character, sort of in that brief synopsis we gave earlier, that she's a loud, clumsy mice within a family of sneaky burglars, that there would be a sort of loud clumsiness, but actually what I think Bronte brought to it is this really lovely sensitivity as well. So she kind of brought that to the character, which probably wasn't what was on the exactly on our minds, but so right when we saw it together.
Yeah, it was funny. I think the screen test we did was her talking about. She was just talking in the interview. She wasn't doing any lines. She was just explaining that she can be a bit clumsy herself sometimes, and she'd stuttered a little bit in the way she was explaining it, and so we put that bit of dialogue in, and got one of our lead animators to do it, and it was just so brilliant. I mean, I guess we don't have it to show, but it was the first time you sort of go down on set. We just sort of went down to see what had been made, and you're like, there she is. That's that character. When you've been writing it for ages and trying to think, is she going to be annoying if she's sort of the kind of like flappy sort of loud one? And
it could have.
And then just to see her so sort of warm and endearing and kind of likable and sort of bright-eyed and naive in the performance that she'd done. It was brilliant. So that was a really lovely moment to sort of.
It sounds like the Creature Comfort shorts from back in the day.
Well, yeah, because I think it was Claire that did that, and she did a lot of the Creature Comfort. So they are the same creatures. You sort of leave those guys with a puppet and a bit of dialogue, and then they'll come back with something absolutely brilliant.
Tell me about Dad Mouse, who Adil Akhtar.
Adil Akhtar, yeah, an amazing, again, sort of empathy in his voice that, conveys beautifully through.
He's brilliant. I mean, he's so funny, but he's so, and he's kind of got I don't know, there's a sort of, just a real warmth to his voice, which I think, I don't know, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we'd seen him in, it wasn't particularly because of I suppose he always plays a character that you instantly endear to, whoever, I think is...
Even in Four Lions, weirdly.
Exactly, Four Lions and Utopia, where he plays a real... I mean, I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a really brilliant performance by him, but you endear to him even though, regardless of what he's doing, because he's, I just think he's a really fantastic actor. So, to work with him and it, I don't know, just having him on board and the kind of
he was great at sort of ad-libbing a lot of things, particularly that sort of nervous rambling where he just I don't know, sort of just going off on a nice tangent. So he was very generous in his performance, would give us lots to play with.
How about Richard E. Grant?
He was absolutely incredible to work with. He was just we'd written the role for him, and then or like inspired by his other performances, and
particularly with Nail and I, we'd had pictures of with Nail pinned on our sort of magpie design board, and that would be his spirit animal.
So to work with him was just such a joy, and he was just amazing. He just brought so much, like, kind of humour, and sort of just would try loads of different things out. Would really, be really interested in like refining something really specific, but also just kind of let loose and do lots of really
He'd often find something quite naughty within the line that we didn't notice was a bit naughty, and then like, okay, yeah,
we'll change that line. Yeah. But it was brilliant. And also the musical side of things, because it's a musical. I guess we haven't talked about that too much, but he just took to the singing and the kind of theatrics of his song
very natural.
So brilliantly. And each time because we had a few sessions, but each time he'd come back and it was like he was more enthusiastic about singing. He'd throw extra, just kind of bizarre things in that have gone into the film.
Yeah. And it is, you know, we're asking them often to do quite strange, very specific, quite strange things, and and to have someone who can just be straight away on board with that and give so much to it was a real gift. Yeah.
How did you settle on a musical style for this?
Well, I think we'd always envisaged it as a musical, but we began very early on in the development working with Ben and Beth from the Bookshop Band to develop the music and develop the songs with us and the score kind of as we were doing the script and the storyboard. So it was a very privileged situation, really, to have the musical team on board right at the beginning of that story development, you know, because often you can get to the end of a film. I'm sure this happens a lot. And it's like, right, over to the here's all the visuals, over to the score. So, yeah, having that musical team really being able to inform the story and set the pace of sequences and feed into the structure of it was a massive help.
And had the casting already taken place then? Did the Bookshop Band know whose voices they were writing?
Oh, no, not at the beginning. There was quite a while between starting writing and doing the storyboards and developing the music all at the same time. There's quite a long time before we'd settled on even just who the characters were and who we should cast. So they hadn't really, and I guess they did have, you know, a decent amount of time to prep and sort of figure out the particular type of, I suppose, I think they were more built around the characters rather than the casting, I guess. And we, right from the beginning, we sort of thought, it'd be great to have a theme for each one of the characters, a melody of some sort that you kind of associate with that character. And then their songs sort of evolved out of that. And then as we went along, and I guess we were learning a lot as well about how to make a musical, and because we haven't made a musical, and that was part of the aspiration, I suppose, was to make, if we thought, well, perhaps it was a foolish aspiration, but we thought, well, if we really try and make a musical with a lot of people that haven't made a musical before, I think it would be good, because we bring, you know, and Ben and Beth, they don't write music for musicals. They're folk artists, and they score film. But bringing them in, they gave us such a kind of different approach to how we'd approach the music.
We did have to adapt each song for the act, you know, finding their register and sort of technical things like that, being like, okay, that, you know, we didn't get much opportunity to sort of work with Gillian and Richard in terms of finding where they're most comfortable singing, you know, until we got into the recording sessions with them. And luckily, obviously, Ben and Beth were there to help build the song, you know, around
we had, because
anyway.
we had a few different recordings, so you'd have a go at recording the song, and then we'd have some time away before we came back and had another go at it. And that was a really nice way of doing it, because you could kind of see the best bit, the bits where it was really working, and then sort of figure out the composition so it complemented it. I think a good example is Gillian and the cat. Her performance of the cat is just came up so brilliantly. But
this is Gillian Anderson. We actually didn't
sorry.
mention her earlier.
Yeah,
on.
so Gillian Anderson plays the cat, and she has such an intensity to her voice, which we really wanted in the cat. She's the sort of villain, but we wanted her to feel effortless, and actually the more relaxed she was, kind of the more sinister she was. So Gillian just brought this brilliant intensity to it, and we found that in her song, actually sort of trying to go all out and sing it like a show tune, it kind of worked against the cat's personality. So one of the early sessions, we just asked Gillian to warm up and read it like a poem, just so she kind of got used to the words in it and the rhymes. And we found that that sort of poem version of it without any music really powerful. So we worked that into it's very intimidating, and so we worked that into the song, and it's sort of a half. I think it sort of just comes across as a lovely song, but it is actually quite like sort of spoken words, which would then that's the sort of example of when you've got the chance to kind of have a go at it and come away and take stock and do it again. It was nice to be able to adapt them around.
I would say as well, if you've watched The Crown, if you've seen Gillian Anderson in The Crown, there are elements of that performance.
Oh yes, yeah.
Oh, she was recording it right at the same time. So we were chatting to her about Thatcher, and I mean I think
it wasn't a conscious decision, but I think maybe there are elements of the cat in Margaret Thatcher, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's what people will be saying. I mean, she just, I think she's got such a fantastic. I mean, she really got the cat straight from the beginning, and got, because we right initially when we were just figuring stuff out, and I guess she doesn't quite know which way we're gonna sort of push it in terms of who the cat is. We were trying out sort of larger than life, sort of a bit more menacing takes on the cat. And then as soon as we kind of figured that she's scarier when she's almost sort of nicer,
blasé,
and sort of more intimate, because she's such a huge presence for Robin. Robin's this tiny little bird and the cat's this giant. Gillian really just was brilliant and sort of really worked with that. It was quite funny when we were recording, because we'd do, for all of the cast, we'd do the lines, the other characters, and pretty much all of the cat's scenes are with just Robin being scared and the cat sort of talking to her. So we'd act out the kind of scared little bird in the corner, and Gillian would give this really kind of fantastic, intimidating performance. And you'd sort of actually be like, I think I am actually scared.
We do have some time for questions, and we do have roving mics as well. So please raise your hand if there's anything you'd like to ask. If I could, so we'll start here. There's a microphone coming down. If I could ask you to not touch the microphone, it will be held on your behalf. If that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Film looks terrific, so I can't wait to see it. Can I ask you about your process? So do you start? I mean, Nick Park famously starts with a doodle, which then inspires a lot of the complete films that he's made. Do you start with doodles, with just the germ of an idea, and then what's your work process? How does it progress from that spark of an idea to the thing that you then present to Aardman? And then having got there, because they're renowned for, I think, largely using directors from in-house, people like Nick Park or Peter Lord. So what was it like kind of taking over from outside, being at the helm of all these Aardman personnel?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably it was less of a doodle, although before we'd pitched the idea, that would be, I've realised that I have these, my go-to like doodle would be a robin, and I'd be drawing robins all the time just before and now we've made it, I've moved on to a different thing, it's a rabbit. But so there's an element of that, but I think actually the sort of starting point was just this beginning situation of thinking of a Christmas story and a robin that's brought up, like an egg rolls into a mouse burrow, and that opening situation I think is
it was a lot of conversation, really, and a lot of there was probably quite a long time before we pitched it, maybe about 4 years, and we'd just be retelling that story to anyone at parties who had listened to us, and so actually that sort of oral tradition of like, just if you can tell the story, and hold someone's attention long enough so they don't walk away, that sort of over 4 years, that got kind of refined. So I think there's a lot of talking, a lot of talking before. Probably, I mean, we did engage an amazing illustrator called Bryony May Smith, who's done there's a picture book coming out of Rom. But she was like our first collaborator before we took it to Aardman, and she did some amazing concept designs and character designs, and that was part of our sort of presentation, along with bad drawings that we had done to Aardman. And then the second part of your question.
Oh yeah, being
allowed in.
I mean, it was, it did feel like you'd been given the keys to like a really amazing car, and you're like, okay, you're gonna trust me to drive this thing. But I mean, the culture there, because I think because of the fact that they've had so many amazing sort of directors that have founded the company, and so there's this sense of it being a small, really small, intimate company, but it's grown quite large, and so that culture was actually really brilliant to just be sort of landed in, because there's this sort of like mutual trust of the people that are making the film and the crew and the kind of and the directors and the writers that you know, and the sort of the mutual trust between that, and you know, if you kind of think, oh well, maybe actually I think this scene should be all about this now, and let's do that, and the kind of support that people get behind you in those sometimes quite odd ideas is really amazing.
But they're amazingly adaptable. You know, we were asking them to do some quite different things to what traditionally had been done there, particularly like, you know, the sort of facial animation and the material, obviously. But there was never a point where, you know, it was like, well, no, this is the way that it's done. It was always really open to trying out different things, and so that was brilliant.
Another question towards the back in the middle, and then we'll come to here next. Oh, okay, right. Okay, so let's start in here and then next.
Yes, you've talked a lot about how you're animating in a rather anthropomorphic way, but I noticed the mice were moving in a very naturalistic way. Did you study animals sort of ethologically in order to do that? The other question, you might not want to give away the secret, but there's a point where they're suspended in midair with all four paws off the ground. How do you do that?
No one knows. We don't know.
Anti-gravity in a bottle, and you sort of sprinkle it on.
Sorry, I forgot the first. What was the first question? That was.
What about studying the animal movements?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, we did.
Particularly birds, actually.
We had a big part of the research and development where you're testing stuff out in the animation department, was figuring out whether we wanted to make Robin's legs move like a real
forward
person.
bending knees or backward
and how, you know, and so we but in the end we decided, well, I mean, I know the mice, they sort of switch between quite human-like limbs, and also when they're on their all fours, they are really mouse-like, and we did reference a lot of you know, real mouse movement. But the idea behind it, and the cat as well, she moves in a very naturalistic way at times. But the idea behind it was to sort of really accentuate or embrace the kind of what makes these animals different and the different ways they move. Because we felt like, you know, like for example, Chicken Run was amazing, but all the chickens in that are sort of anthropomorphized, so they're human limbs and they sort of bend like this, and although that works brilliantly for that film, for ours we you know, the differences of these creatures was important to the storytelling, and the difference of Robin to the mice. So we found that actually by making them feel naturalistic in these movements, it kind of accentuated their differences, which I think makes for a richer film.
Well, particularly for this story, which is about people embracing their differences and those contrasts, creating something stronger. So keeping their natural animalisticness.
Yeah, which was great. And then the animators had a lot of fun as well, sort of just riffing off that. So we do some tests that look very, very realistic, and then somewhere they're jumping around like little sort of puppies and things like that. And it was really fun to see them just sort of experiment. But
It's also
But yeah,
quite
they are sort of
quite
tight.
challenging when you plan something. You're naturally like, okay, a character's going to strike a match now, but then you remember that we haven't given them any fingers or arms. So there's loads of like, well, how does someone do that with backwards bending arms like that? So but those challenges, I think, make for interesting results much more than. But we did have to sort of. It was one of the top lines of our Bible was like no finger feathers and no bending things that way.
A
because
Bible's
it's
like something you make like
a rule
effectively
book.
a rule book of the characters and how they should
Yeah,
move. So all the
'cause
animals.
it is very tempting to go to the shorthand of. Just pick
Yeah,
something
and
up.
actually, a lot of the story artists, as we were figuring stuff out, they draw the characters just if it says in the script, they pick up something, they draw them grabbing something with their hands and. Sort of feathered hands, and so we had to sort of figure out that. But once we committed to the fact that we can bend the rules a little bit, but pretty much they've got the anatomy of the real animals. It felt like a really good thing to work with because and again it didn't. We weren't sort of I don't know, kind of lessening the differences between all these creatures by making them a bit more human. We left them as they were, and which meant, I think, that the message behind it, and especially Robin is very different to the rest of her family, and the film is about celebrating that rather than seeing the problems in it. So.
There was one over here.
How did you implement British humour but also make it appealing to an American audience?
What a very good
Thanks,
question.
Well,
we made sure there were fart and poo jokes. Very important. Did we? I don't think that was. No,
I don't know, really. I mean, someone else was asking, like, it felt like there was still the sensibilities of the Aardman, or the kind of Aardman sense of humour and spirit within the film, which is one of the biggest compliments we can get. And I think, a big part of it is, I suppose, the characters themselves. They're quite, the humour is in in their sort of weaknesses and their flaws, but we're still very loving and caring to them. And I think that sense of humour is quite British.
And there is the optimism, I guess, which is quite American, maybe. the underlying optimism of it'll be okay.
And I mean, the other thing is we were working with, a lot of people at Aardman that know how to do that. They know how to, that's what they've been doing for a very long time, which is taking, perhaps unusual characters and sort of bringing the humour, or making the humour sort of resonate with people, and I guess they've done it in America quite well. So I don't know. It might, we'll see.
Good question.
But thanks for the question. That was
Another question? Yeah, there.
The animals were felt, so did you have to make new ones after they got damaged, or were they the same throughout the whole movie?
Oh, that's a good question. Because, we did have a little... In a lot of these productions where you make a stop-motion film, you have something... You have where the puppets are made, and then you have the kind of puppet hospital. Because after they're filmed, it doesn't really matter what material you make them out of. They might break a little bit, or they might
just get dirty.
So you have to clean them. But ours, the hospital was quite a big place because
it was a busy
place. Because every time an animator would finish with them, there'd be lots of extra fluff on them, or they might have torn a little bit that they've been working on. So that there was a lot of fixing them as we went, and actually, although when you watch it, it looks like it's the same puppet that's just moving from one shot to the other. That we made quite a lot of each character.
So I think there were eight robins, 4 sets of mice, 3 magpies.
Yeah.
and 2 cats. It's like you could probably construct a Christmas song out of that.
So
Two
we'd
cats.
make a lot of them. So then, and what that would mean is, if one was getting fixed, we could film with another. But it also meant that you can actually have a few robins being filmed at the same time.
And the animators would be fixing as well as they'd go along. So they'd all have these like little defluffers that you have for woolly jumpers. And so you'll see, if you ever watch the making of, they're all there kind of like giving them all buzz cuts to sort of remove any bits of fluff or dirt. So little tricks along the way.
I think we have time for one last question, if anyone would like to ask something. One right in the
Alan.
middle there.
Hello, Dan and Mikey.
Hi,
Oh, hello.
How are you doing?
I have a question for you about going to such a big professional company like Aardman and the scale of the production being much vaster when previously you seemed perfectly happy in a small, sweaty basement.
That's the last time we.
That's really
worked
sweet.
together.
No, thanks.
But, compared to doing crazy hours doing pretty much everything yourself, you've now got a huge team of people and
Yeah.
just navigating that whole process.
Well, I think that. Yeah, sorry. Was that finish your question?
That'll do.
How did we?
About the scale, the upping in scale. Yeah, I mean it's there's still, obscene hours either way, but
I think it's sort of because I suppose it's the journey from, if you're often an sort of animation director would start out making their own films. I think this is probably the usual trajectory, which is you make your own films and you probably make it by yourself, and there's a big part of that is because you kind of want complete control over this little world, and also you haven't got the means to work with people. And I think that journey from starting out like that, which is quite solitary, to working with a huge team of people is one that you just sort of do bit by bit, and each time you make a project, maybe there's someone else might help you, and then you learn, oh, actually, I sort of need to know what I'm doing. I can't just figure it out as I go. I need to know what I'm doing before I work with people, because otherwise they say, "What do you want me to make?" You say, I don't know.
I think
That sort of trajectory of learning how to work with people, I think it just comes from I don't know. Each time, I mean, we've been fortunate. I think with each project, we've probably the crew has grown a little bit, and you get used to it. But Aardman it never felt daunting working there, even though it is a very big studio and it's a big machine that makes all these, it's a huge area that sort of big warehouse where all this stuff's made, with hundreds of different rooms to film in. It never felt daunting because the sort of support and the spirit of telling a story and making fantastic characters and sort of is intrinsic in it as well. So, and I think actually, because me and Mikey both started out making our own things, and the way you get it made is you spend hours and hours in dark rooms sort of making stuff yourself. I think that kind of is a nice preparation, because pretty much any element that we're talking to a team about, we've done something of that ourselves in some way, and it kind of, what you're asking people.
You know the pain that you're asking people to go through, because
and
we've all communally suffered the pain already.
Yeah.
So every request is sort of done with a wince of like, I'm really sorry.
Unfortunately,
it's
that's
healthy
sorry.
preparation. No.
That is unfortunately all we've got time for this afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us, Dan and Mikey.
Thank you
for being
so
here.
much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Robbie.